what can the communities do to help themselves to tackle race inequalities?
I think communities have always helped themselves. I think there's a myth which says that communities are responsible for their own discrimination or their own livelihood. I don't think anybody wants to live in a ghetto. I think people want to leave ghettos. I don't think anybody enjoys being homeless or facing the prospect of being unemployed or living in a so-called sinker state or living in an area where there is a heterogeneous notion of popular culture or entertainment. I mean, I live in an area called Southall, which is largely, Asian migrant population or black Asian population or Asian British population, whatever form you want to describe. And we did a survey 2 years ago of what kind of shops should exist. And most people said, yes, we are happy with jewelry shops and Asian restaurants, but we want Marks and Spencers as well, and we want different, we want Benetels in there, because the variety of goods that we want actually creates a different picture and regeneration in our community. So I think people aspire to integrate always, unless there are specific reasons. I'll come to that. And actually, the economic situation actually doesn't allow them to leave, or the family situations doesn't allow them to leave. There are problems in our communities, and I think the issue of de facto segregation, which is partly as a result of how local authorities have created housing problems and allocated housing, and partly as a result of communities who either feel unsafe to move or because they use a religious lens to determine their place of life or form of life, stick to a perceived notion of community rather than the actual lifestyle that is lived in communities. Let me just explain what I mean. I think if you look at Europe and if you look at America and compare Britain is actually the most integrated society in terms of people living next to each other. I'm not saying we should congratulate ourselves. I think that's a natural form and a form of habitation. I mean, I've been to Germany and spoken at public meetings, and even at anti-racist community organizations, the first question sometimes I'm asked is it true that black people and white people live in the same town and street in London? It makes me cringe, but actually, we are more integrated. We are more cohesive. We don't need people or authorities to tell us that we need to be more cohesive. Generally speaking, where there are large conurbations of black migrants, and I use the word generically, there is very little hostility towards white communities. We begin to integrate. What has happened, and that's where I think your question is very relevant, is that settled communities begin to, for different reasons, and I'm not justifying it because there is competition for resources due to scarcity, and we begin to blame newcomers. So in my own town, Asian communities and Asian people start blaming Somalis for problems they're not responsible for, or Polish people are blamed for...
The new immigrants.
Which has always been there historically because of the way towns are built and how migrant labor moves from one area to the other. But I do believe that the racism suffered by BME community is very different qualitatively to notions of prejudice which people have about each other. I don't think you can equate prejudice with racism. I think it fuels it. It's unacceptable. We should not condone it. We should condemn it. But the notion of racism that exists in this country, by and large, is based on the issue of power and our colonial history. And we have to look at those struggles and look at these experiences and use it in a positive sense. And I think we can develop a shared value amongst ourselves, providing black minority communities believe that their existence is not based on stereotyping them. They have equal access to jobs, and that they are allowed, and we cherish the notion of heterogeneous rather than homogeneous cultures. So we can be different but still be British, and we bring our different experiences to the table, which actually fortify us and makes us stronger. I don't think we, including the government, for example, and sometimes we do it, for example, but not often, is we don't actually promote the diverse nature of our communities and the strength that is brought properly, effectively, loudly, nationally and internationally. We do it at certain times to get business ventures or like the Olympics, but we on a day-to-day basis don't do that. Undoubtedly, there's a small fringe who hate this notion of multiculturalism, the dynamism of multiculturalism, but I think that's a fringe, and there are sectors of the population not living in urban areas who haven't come across multicultural dynamic societies or communities, and their images of black communities is through a mirror of what they believe to be imagination of communities through the power of media and how they view television and through popular culture. I think we need to be proud that youth culture is profoundly based and influenced by black music, for example.
Yeah.
But we don't appreciate that and the dynamism and the creativity and the energy that brings in. In many forms, popular culture, etc., we are an integrated community, and I think the problem arises when integration is confused with assimilation, and when, for example, grown terrorists in areas like this are seen as symptoms of failure of multiculturalism, as if they have never been influenced by British values and culture. In fact, the fact is that they have been, and it's not the hotbed of their own culture which has driven them to this, insidious and horrendous acts of violence against individuals. So I think we need to have a perspective which is much more dynamic and creative and honest than we have at the moment. But I think forums like these are a very good start for involving people and for shaping future notions of multiculturalism, equality, integration, and notions of justice, which we've striven for centuries, and at least in my lifetime over the last 2-3 decades.